In early 1900s America, childhood did not mean school for many children, for thousands of boys and girls. The day began not with books, but with factory whistles. Before sunrise, children walked through dark streets toward mills and workshops. Their hands were small, but the responsibilities placed on them were heavy. Instead of learning letters and numbers, they learned how to survive long workdays. This was not an exception or a rare case. It was a normal reality across the country. Childhood, as we understand it today, was a privilege few could afford. At the turn of the century, America was transforming rapidly. Factories, railroads, and industrial cities expanded at unprecedented speed. This growth created enormous demand for labor. Businesses wanted workers who were cheap, obedient, and plentiful. Children fit these requirements perfectly. They could be paid little and controlled easily. Industrial success depended on maximizing output, not protecting workers. As machines multiplied, so did the exploitation of children. Progress came at a human cost that few were willing to acknowledge. Poverty was the strongest force pushing children into factories. Many families lived one paycheck away from hunger. Adult wages were often too low to support an entire household. When survival was at stake, every family member was expected to contribute. Sending a child to work was not seen as cruelty, but necessity. Parents faced impossible choices between education and food. Poverty removed choice entirely. Child labor became a survival strategy, not a decision made lightly. School was not free or accessible for everyone. In the early 1900s, many rural and industrial areas had few schools or none at all. When schools existed, families often had to pay fees and buy supplies. For poor households, these costs were impossible. Education was secondary to survival. Without strong compulsory education laws, children were easily pulled out of classrooms and into workplaces. School became a dream reserved for the wealthy. Textile mills employed thousands of children across America. Some were as young as 6 years old. Their tasks included cleaning machines and fixing broken threads. These jobs required speed and constant attention. Cotton dust filled the air, damaging young lungs. Accidents were common and injuries were rarely treated properly. Despite the danger, children continued working because their families depended on their income. The mills consumed both their energy and their health. Coal mining was among the most dangerous forms of child labor. Boys worked underground, sorting coal and opening ventilation doors. Darkness, heat, and poor air made conditions brutal. Explosions and collapses were constant threats. Children worked long hours with little protection. If a child was injured or killed, work continued without pause. Mines treated children as disposable labor rather than lives worth protecting. Working children often labored 10 to 14 hours a day. Breaks were rare and rest was discouraged. Exhaustion was part of daily life. Children returned home too tired to play or study. Their growing bodies were pushed beyond healthy limits. Chronic fatigue weakened them physically and mentally. Work consumed their entire existence. Childhood became defined by endurance rather than growth. Factories lacked basic safety standards. Machines had exposed gears and blades. Children lost fingers, hands, and sometimes their lives. Minor injuries often turned deadly due to infections. Medical care was expensive and rarely provided. Injured children were replaced rather than treated. Fear forced many to hide pain and continue working. Health was sacrificed in exchange for survival. Many child laborers came from immigrant families. Italians, Irish, and Eastern Europeans arrived seeking opportunity. Instead, they found exploitation. Language barriers and discrimination left them powerless. Employers targeted immigrant children because their families were unlikely to complain. The American dream was built on the silent suffering of immigrant households. Their children paid the highest price. The question remains, why did no one stop this? Fear was the answer. Families feared losing income. Children feared punishment. Laws were weak and rarely enforced. Society accepted child labor as normal. Silence protected the system. This silence was not agreement but survival. The industrial foundation of America was built on voices that were never heard. In the early 1900s, the American legal system offered very little protection to working children. Child labor laws either did not exist or were extremely weak. Each state had its own rules, and many states allowed children as young as 8 or 9 to work legally. Factory inspectors were rare, and when inspections happened, owners were warned in advance. This allowed them to hide child workers temporarily. The law often favored business owners over families. As a result, factories continued using children openly without fear of punishment. The government knew this was happening, but stopping it was not a priority. Factory owners preferred children for very specific reasons. Children could be paid far less than adults and were less likely to protest. Their small bodies allowed them to crawl under machines and reach tight spaces. If a child was injured or exhausted, replacing them was easy. There was always another poor family willing to send their child to work. To factory owners, children were not seen as humans with futures, but as replaceable tools. Profit mattered more than safety, education, or morality. This mindset fueled child labor for decades. Not all working children were inside factories. Many worked on city streets. Boys sold newspapers, shined shoes, or carried luggage. Girls often worked as domestic servants or helped in small workshops. These children faced constant danger from traffic, crime, and harsh weather. Street work was unregulated and often invisible to authorities. Children worked long hours late into the night, especially newsboys. Their education suffered, and many never learned to read properly. Street labor was another hidden face of child exploitation in America. Glass and steel factories were among the most dangerous places for children. Extreme heat, sharp materials, and heavy machinery made injuries common. Children worked near molten glass and red-hot steel with little protection. Burns, cuts, and permanent scars were part of daily life. Many children lost fingers, eyesight, or their ability to work forever. There was no compensation for injuries. Once a child was damaged, they were simply dismissed. Their suffering was considered a cost of production. Play is a natural part of childhood. But for working children in the 1900s, play did not exist. After long hours of labor, their bodies were too tired for games. There were no playgrounds waiting for them, only more responsibilities. Weekends were often spent working as well. Many children grew up too fast emotionally and physically. They missed the social development that school and play provide. This loss of childhood left deep psychological scars that followed them into adulthood. Factories were strict environments. If a child slowed down, made a mistake, or disobeyed orders, punishment followed. This could include verbal abuse, physical punishment, or docked wages. Children were taught to fear supervisors. Complaining was not an option. Many children learned silence as a survival skill. Fear replaced curiosity. Obedience replaced learning. These conditions shaped a generation that grew up under constant pressure and control. Girls often performed labor that was less visible but equally harsh. Many worked in textile mills, laundries, or private homes. Domestic work was especially isolating. Girls cooked, cleaned, and cared for other people's children from a very young age. Because this work happened inside homes, it was rarely inspected. Abuse and overwork were common. Girls' labor was often ignored by reformers at first, making their suffering even more hidden. Once a family depended on a child's income, escaping child labor became nearly impossible. Low wages meant families stayed poor. Poverty forced children to keep working instead of studying. Without education, those children grew into low-paid adults, who then sent their own children to work. This cycle trapped generations. Child labor was not just an individual problem. It was a systemic one that kept families locked in poverty. Not everyone accepted child labor silently. Teachers, journalists, and social reformers began speaking out. Organizations started collecting evidence and testimonies. Slowly, the public became aware of the damage being done. This resistance did not begin in government offices, but in communities. It was the first crack in the system that protected factory owners. Change was slow, but awareness had begun. By the early 1910s, America could no longer ignore what was happening to its children. Photographs, reports, and public pressure forced society to confront reality. Child labor was no longer hidden. The image of children working in dangerous conditions challenged the idea of progress. The nation had to choose between profit and humanity. This moment marked the beginning of serious reform. In the early 1900s, children were seen as the cheapest form of labor available. Factory owners calculated profit carefully, and children fit perfectly into their plans. A child could be paid less than half of an adult's wage while producing nearly the same output. There were no benefits, no job security, and no responsibility toward their future. If a child became sick or injured, replacing them cost nothing. This economic logic stripped children of their humanity and reduced them to numbers on a ledger. The system rewarded exploitation and punished compassion. Many factory machines were not designed with safety in mind. Children were assigned tasks that adults avoided. especially jobs near fast-moving or sharp machinery. Their small hands were useful for cleaning, fixing jams, or pulling materials from dangerous areas. Accidents were frequent and often severe. Fingers were crushed, arms were pulled into gears, and clothing became trapped. These injuries were not considered tragedies by factory management. They were treated as unavoidable losses in the pursuit of productivity. Working long hours did not only damage children physically, it also exhausted them mentally. Repetitive tasks required constant attention, and a single mistake could lead to punishment or injury. Children worked while sleepy, hungry, and emotionally drained. Many suffered from anxiety and fear, though these conditions were not recognized at the time. Instead of learning creativity or problem-solving, children learned endurance and silence. Their minds developed around survival, not growth. Child labor was not limited to cities. In rural America, children worked long hours on farms. They planted, harvested, and handled heavy tools from a very young age. School attendance in farming communities was seasonal or non-existent. Families depended on children to maintain crops and livestock. Agricultural labor was often ignored in reform efforts because it happened far from factories. Yet the physical strain and lack of education affected rural children just as deeply. Some industries required work around the clock, and children were included in night shifts. Textile mills, bakeries, and canneries often operated late into the night. Children worked under artificial lighting, their bodies struggling to stay awake. Lack of sleep weakened their immune systems and slowed development. Many children collapsed from exhaustion. Night work erased any chance of attending school regularly and disconnected children from normal daily life. When children became sick or injured, medical care was rarely provided. Doctors were expensive and employers did not take responsibility. Minor injuries often became serious infections. Some children developed lifelong disabilities. Families bore the cost alone. Without treatment, many children returned to work too soon, worsening their condition. Health was sacrificed for survival. This lack of care shortened lives and damaged bodies permanently.